In the quiet town of Willow Creek, Oregon, where the wind whispers through the pines and the streets barely hum with life, lived a young woman named Claire Donovan. At 22, Claire was a fragile soul with a burden she could not escape. She was blind, her world cloaked in endless darkness since childhood. Her hazel eyes, though beautiful, saw nothing of the rugged hills or the soft glow of dawn. She lived in a crumbling house with her foster mother, Margaret Hayes, a woman hardened by years of struggle and drowned in the haze of cheap whiskey. To Margaret, Claire was not a daughter but a weight, a reminder of dreams that never took flight. The townsfolk pitied Claire, their whispers trailing her as she tapped her cane along the dirt paths, but pity was all they offered. Claire's days were simple yet heavy. She spent hours by the window, feeling the sun's warmth on her face, dreaming of a life beyond the shadows. She had no memory of her early years, her mind a blank slate after a fever stole her past when she was just 5. All she had was a necklace, a small silver chain with 2 pendants, a sun and a moon. It was her only treasure, a mystery she clung to, though she could not recall who gave it to her or why. Margaret mocked it, calling it junk, but Claire held it close, tracing its shapes with trembling fingers, as if it held answers she could not see. One gray afternoon, as rain tapped against the roof, Margaret stumbled home with a strange energy in her voice. She spoke of a job in New York, a chance for Claire to escape their dead-end town. "They need someone like you," Margaret slurred, her words thick with deceit. "A kind man offered $5,000 to get you started. It's your ticket out." Claire hesitated, her heart pounding with unease, but Margaret pressed on, painting a picture of a better life. Naive and desperate for change, Claire agreed. She packed her few belongings, a threadbare sweater and her necklace, trusting the woman who had raised her despite the years of cold neglect. The journey to New York was a blur of sounds, the rumble of a bus, the chatter of strangers, the clink of coins as Margaret counted her payment. When they arrived, Margaret led Claire to a towering building in Manhattan, its glass walls a stark contrast to the wooden shacks of Willow Creek. A man met them there, his voice smooth and commanding. "This is her?" he asked, and Margaret nodded eagerly. "Take good care of her," she said, pocketing the cash before vanishing into the city's chaos. Claire stood alone, confused and abandoned, her cane tapping nervously against the marble floor. That man was Jack Sullivan, 30 years old and the CEO of Sullivan Enterprises, a real estate empire that dominated New York's skyline. Tall and striking, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, Jack carried the weight of wealth and expectation. He was not there by choice. His grandmother, Dorothy Sullivan, a formidable woman in her 70s, had summoned him. Dorothy ruled the family with an iron will, her beliefs rooted in old traditions. She clutched a leather-bound book of family lore, insisting a prophecy foretold ruin unless Jack married a woman destined to save them. Claire, she declared, was that woman. "Her birth aligns with the signs," Dorothy insisted, her voice unwavering. "She will protect our legacy." Jack scoffed at the idea. He had no time for superstition or a wife he did not choose. His heart belonged to a memory, a girl he called Sunny from his childhood in upstate New York. They had been inseparable, 2 kids running through fields under a summer sky. He gave her a necklace with a sun and moon, promising to marry her one day beneath the stars. Then she vanished, lost to a tragedy he could not recall, leaving him with guilt and a vow to find her. That promise haunted him, a flicker of light in his cold, calculated world. But Dorothy would not relent. "Marry her or the family falls," she warned, her eyes glinting with resolve. Reluctantly, Jack agreed, though his resentment simmered. Claire was brought to the Sullivan Mansion, a sprawling estate on Long Island, its halls lined with portraits of stern ancestors. She felt the shift in the air, the weight of wealth and disdain. The family saw her as an intruder, a blind girl from nowhere, unworthy of their name. Jack barely spoke to her, his presence a shadow that chilled her more than comforted. Dorothy orchestrated their wedding, a rushed affair in the mansion's chapel. Claire stood in a borrowed gown, her hands shaking as she repeated vows she barely understood. That night, under Dorothy's watchful eye, Jack fulfilled his duty in silence. It was mechanical, devoid of tenderness, leaving Claire hollow and ashamed. She lay awake after, clutching her necklace, tears soaking the pillow as the reality of her betrayal sank in. Margaret had not sent her to a better life. She had sold her, traded her for a handful of dollars. Jack was no savior, just a man trapped by his grandmother's whims, his heart closed to her. The Sullivan family whispered behind her back, their words sharp as knives. "She's nothing," they sneered. "A beggar in our halls." Claire's blindness made her vulnerable, her cane a symbol of weakness they mocked, yet she held on to a fragile hope, a whisper in her soul that this was not her end. She did not know Jack searched for Sunny, that the necklace she wore was the key to a past they shared. Her memory was gone, but her heart ached with a longing she could not name. Jack, meanwhile, buried himself in work, avoiding Claire as guilt gnawed at him. He hated the prophecy, hated Dorothy's control, hated the stranger now tied to him. Every glance at Claire reminded him of his failure to find Sunny, the girl who once lit up his world. He kept her necklace's twin, the sun pendant, in a drawer, a secret he guarded fiercely. Dorothy watched them both, convinced Claire was their salvation, blind to the storm brewing within her grandson. The stage was set, a fragile union built on lies and loss, ready to unravel in ways no one could foresee. Claire's life in the mansion began as a prisoner in a gilded cage. She traced the walls with her cane, learning the echoes of each room, her spirit bruised but unbroken. She did not know Vanessa Harper watched from the shadows, a woman with eyes on Jack and a hunger for power. Nor did she know her necklace held a truth that would change everything. For now, she was alone, a blind girl sold into a world that scorned her, her heart whispering of a love she could not remember, a love that might yet find her again. Claire Donovan's new life in the Sullivan Mansion on Long Island was a prison of whispers and shadows. The grand halls, with their polished floors and towering chandeliers, offered no warmth to her darkened world. At 22, she navigated her blindness with a cane, its soft taps echoing through rooms where she felt like a ghost. The Sullivan family treated her with thinly veiled contempt, their voices dripping with scorn whenever she passed. Jack Sullivan, her husband of mere weeks, was a distant figure, his presence fleeting and cold. He spent his days locked in his office at Sullivan Enterprises in Manhattan, leaving Claire to face the disdain alone. She clung to her necklace, the sun and moon pendants her only comfort, a lifeline to a past she could not recall. Unbeknownst to Claire, a storm was brewing within the walls of her new home. Vanessa Harper, a sharp and ambitious employee at Sullivan Enterprises, had her sights set on Jack. At 28, Vanessa was a striking woman with auburn hair and calculating green eyes, her beauty a mask for a heart consumed by greed. She had climbed the ranks with ruthless precision, but she wanted more. Jack's power, his wealth, and his name. Vanessa knew of Jack's obsession with Sunny, the childhood friend he longed to find. She overheard him once, late at night in his office, confiding in his assistant Greg Foster about the necklace with the sun and moon pendants. "Sunny was my everything," Jack had murmured, his voice raw with longing. "I'll never stop looking for her." That moment planted a seed in Vanessa's mind, a plan as cunning as it was cruel. Greg Foster, a lanky man in his 30s with a quiet demeanor and hidden resentment, became her ally. Greg had served Jack loyally for years, but envy festered beneath his calm exterior. He craved the life Jack led, the power he wielded, and Vanessa promised him a share of it. One evening, as Claire sat alone in the mansion's library tracing the edges of a book she could not read, her necklace slipped from her neck and clattered to the floor. Vanessa, passing by on her way to deliver reports, spotted it gleaming in the dim light. She picked it up, her fingers curling around the pendants, a smile tugging at her lips. "This is it," she whispered to herself, the key to Jack's heart now in her grasp. Vanessa wasted no time. She met Greg in a shadowed corner of the Sullivan Enterprises building the next day, her voice low and urgent. "We can use this," she said, holding up the necklace. "I'll become Sonny. You know his stories, his memories. Tell me everything." Greg hesitated, his loyalty to Jack flickering, but Vanessa's promise of wealth tipped the scales. Over the following weeks, he fed her details: the summer days by the lake, the games they played, the promise under the stars. Vanessa studied it all, crafting her deception with care. She burned a small scar onto her shoulder with a heated coin, mimicking a mark Jack once described Sonny having from a fall. Then, with the necklace in hand, she approached him. It was a rainy afternoon when Vanessa stepped into Jack's office, her expression soft and hesitant. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling just enough to seem genuine, "there's something I need to tell you." She pulled the necklace from her pocket, letting it dangle before him. Jack's eyes widened, his breath catching as he recognized the sun and moon pendants. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, rising from his chair. Vanessa lowered her gaze, tears welling up on cue. "It's mine," she lied. "I've had it since I was a kid. I think I'm Sonny." She recounted the tales Greg had shared, her words laced with just enough truth to hook him. The scar on her shoulder sealed the deal. Jack's doubt crumbled, replaced by a flood of hope. He pulled her into his arms, whispering, "I've found you," as Vanessa hid a triumphant smirk. From that day, Jack's attention shifted entirely to Vanessa. He believed she was Sonny, the girl he had lost, and Claire faded into the background of his life. Vanessa moved into the mansion at his insistence, her presence a constant thorn in Claire's side. Dorothy Sullivan, ever watchful, approved of Vanessa, blind to the lie. "She's good for him," Dorothy declared, dismissing Claire as a failed experiment. Claire felt the change acutely. Jack no longer spoke to her, his footsteps avoiding her rooms. Vanessa, emboldened by her success, began her torment. She whispered insults when they were alone, calling Claire a burden, a nobody. Margaret Hayes, summoned by Vanessa for petty tasks, joined in, her slurred taunts cutting deeper than ever. "You're worthless," Margaret spat one night, locking Claire in a storage room for hours as punishment for spilling tea she could not see. Claire's world grew darker still when she discovered she was pregnant. A faint hope flickered within her, a chance to build something good from her broken life. She felt the life growing inside her, a secret she kept close, dreaming of a child who might love her unconditionally. But Vanessa sensed the shift in Claire's demeanor, the subtle glow beneath her pain. She would not let it stand. At a private dinner in the mansion, attended only by the family and a few staff, Vanessa struck. She waited until Claire rose to leave, her cane tapping uncertainly, then tripped her with a swift foot. Claire tumbled down a short flight of stairs, her cry echoing through the silent hall. Pain seared through her, and by the time a maid found her, blood stained her dress. The doctor confirmed her worst fear: the baby was gone. Jack arrived hours later, summoned by Dorothy, his face a mask of indifference. "What happened?" he asked, his tone flat. Vanessa clung to his arm, tears streaming as she lied. "She fell on her own. She's so clumsy." Claire, weak and grieving on a guest room bed, whispered through sobs, "She pushed me." But Jack turned away, his belief in Vanessa unshaken. "You're causing trouble again," he said coldly, leaving her to mourn alone. Dorothy, too, sided with Vanessa, her faith in the prophecy wavering. "Perhaps I was wrong about you," she muttered, abandoning Claire to her sorrow. Desperate and shattered, Claire confronted Jack the next day in his study. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I want a divorce." She stood before him, her cane clutched tightly, her blind eyes glistening with unshed tears. Jack barely looked up from his papers. "You're my wife by law," he replied, his words sharp. "Live with it." Vanessa, lurking nearby, smirked as Claire stumbled out, her plea ignored. The loss of her child broke something in Claire, but it also kindled a spark of defiance. She retreated to her room, clutching her necklace, its pendants warm against her skin. She did not know its meaning, but it felt like a promise, a whisper of strength she would soon need. Jack, meanwhile, sank deeper into Vanessa's web. He showered her with gifts, took her to dinners in the city, convinced he had reclaimed his lost love. Vanessa played her role flawlessly, feeding him stories of their supposed past, her lies tightening around his heart. Greg watched in silence, pocketing payments from Vanessa, his guilt buried beneath ambition. Dorothy beamed at the pair, oblivious to the truth. Claire, alone in her grief, became a shadow in her own home, her spirit battered but not yet broken. She could not see the path ahead, but fate was shifting, ready to pull her from the darkness into a light she had never known. The necklace, her silent companion, held secrets she could not yet grasp. It tied her to Jack in ways neither understood, a thread from a childhood lost to fever and time. Vanessa's triumph was fragile, built on stolen moments and a borrowed trinket. Claire's pain was a crucible, forging her for the trials to come. The mansion, once her cage, would soon be the stage for a reckoning none of them could foresee. Claire Donovan's world had crumbled within the cold walls of the Sullivan Mansion on Long Island. At 22, she was a shadow of herself, her blindness a constant reminder of her isolation. The loss of her unborn child, taken by Vanessa Harper's cruelty, left her hollow. Her pleas for divorce had fallen on deaf ears, Jack Sullivan's indifference cutting deeper than any blade. The necklace with its sun and moon pendants remained her only solace, a fragile link to a past she could not recall. She spent her days in a small room at the edge of the estate, tracing its shapes, her spirit bruised but stirring with a quiet resolve. The whispers of the Sullivan family faded into background noise, their scorn no longer her focus. Something within her was shifting, a spark of strength she could not yet name. Meanwhile, across the country in Los Angeles, a man named Richard Langley sat in his sprawling office atop the Langley Corporation tower. At 60, Richard was a titan of industry, his silver hair and sharp gray eyes commanding respect. His wealth was vast, his influence unmatched, but his heart carried a wound that never healed. 20 years ago, his daughter Emily had been stolen from him, kidnapped at 2 years old during a chaotic moment at a crowded fair. The police searched for months, but the trail went cold. Richard never stopped looking, funding private investigators and a nonprofit called Lost and Found, dedicated to reuniting families. One day a breakthrough came. A volunteer flagged a case from Willow Creek, Oregon. A blind girl named Claire Donovan, abandoned by her foster mother, matching Emily's birth date and a faint description of a necklace she wore as a toddler. Richard's pulse raced as he read the report. He dispatched a team to New York, where Claire now lived, their mission discreet but urgent. On a crisp morning, as Claire sat by her window feeling the autumn breeze, a knock echoed through her room. She tensed, expecting Vanessa or Margaret Hayes with more venom. Instead, a gentle voice spoke. "Miss Donovan, my name is Sarah from Lost and Found. May we talk?" Claire nodded, wary but curious. Sarah explained everything, the kidnapping, the necklace, the years of searching. "We believe you're Emily Langley," she said softly. "Your father wants to meet you." Claire's hands trembled around her pendants, her mind reeling. She had no memory of a father, no proof beyond the necklace she could not explain, yet the hope in Sarah's voice tugged at her, a lifeline she desperately needed. Within days, Claire was on a private jet to Los Angeles, her cane replaced by Sarah's guiding hand. Richard waited at his mansion in Beverly Hills, its white columns and manicured gardens a world apart from Willow Creek. When Claire stepped through the door, he froze, tears welling in his eyes. She looked like his late wife, her features softened by time but unmistakable. "Emily," he whispered, stepping forward. Claire flinched, unaccustomed to kindness, but his embrace was warm, steady. "I've found you," he said, his voice breaking. "I never stopped looking." Overwhelmed, Claire clung to him, the word father, foreign, yet comforting on her tongue. Richard explained her past, the kidnapping, the fever that stole her sight and memories, the necklace he had given her as a baby. It all clicked, a puzzle piecing together in her darkened mind. Richard wasted no time. He brought in the best ophthalmologists from across the globe, their expertise fueled by his wealth. In a sleek hospital room, Claire underwent surgery, her heart pounding with fear and hope. When the bandages came off days later, Light flooded her world for the first time in years. She blinked, tears streaming as she saw Richard's face, his gray eyes shining with pride. Colors danced before her, the blue of the sky, the green of the trees, the warmth of her father's smile. "You're home," he said, and Claire nodded, her voice lost to emotion. The darkness was gone, replaced by a clarity she had never known. She was Emily Langley now, a name that carried weight and promise. Back in New York, Jack Sullivan's life was unraveling. His belief in Vanessa as Sunny began to falter. She slipped one evening, forgetting a detail about their childhood lake games, a memory only the real Sunny would know. "You said we caught fireflies," he pressed, his brow furrowing. Vanessa stammered, her excuse thin, and Jack's doubt grew. He confronted Greg Foster, his assistant, sensing unease in the man's silence. "What aren't you telling me?" Jack demanded, but Greg dodged, his loyalty split. Jack's unease deepened as Sullivan Enterprises faced a crisis. Derek Marshall, a rival real estate mogul, had launched a quiet assault, buying up shares and spreading rumors of instability. Vanessa, cozying up to Derek, fed him secrets, her ambition blinding her to the fallout. Richard saw Claire's potential and gave her a new purpose. "You're my daughter," he said one evening, handing her a folder. "I want you to lead Langley Corp's New York branch." Claire hesitated, her confidence fragile, but Richard's faith steadied her. She returned to New York, no longer the blind girl in a borrowed gown, but a woman with power and vision. Her first act was to face Margaret Hayes, who had slunk back into her life demanding money. "You sold me," Claire said, her voice steel as she stood in a sleek office overlooking Manhattan. "You have no claim here." Margaret shrank under her gaze, fleeing in shame. The Sullivan family, too, felt her presence. Dorothy Sullivan, frail but defiant, met her with grudging respect. "You've changed," she admitted, though her allegiance remained with Vanessa. Claire's transformation was not just physical. She dove into her role, her mind sharp and her will unbroken. She hired investigators to trace her past, piecing together fragments of her lost years. One night, poring over old photos Richard sent, she paused at an image of a boy with dark hair, laughing by a lake. "Jackie," the caption read, a nickname from her father's notes. Her heart stuttered. Could it be Jack? The necklace, the promise under the stars, the fever that erased it all. She pushed the thought aside, unwilling to trust a man who had hurt her so deeply. Yet the seed was planted, a question she could not ignore. Jack, meanwhile, grappled with his crumbling empire. Sullivan Enterprises teetered as Derek's maneuvers tightened their grip. Vanessa clung to Jack, her lies fraying at the edges. "I'm your Sunny," she insisted, but her words rang hollow. Dorothy watched, her faith in Vanessa shaken, but not yet broken. Claire's return to New York sent ripples through their world. She attended a gala hosted by Langley Corp., her elegance turning heads, her eyes now seeing the faces that once mocked her. Jack saw her there, a stranger in a sapphire gown, and something stirred in him, a flicker of recognition he could not place. Vanessa noticed, her jealousy flaring, her grip on him tightening. Claire began to fight back, her strength growing with each step. She confronted Vanessa at the gala, her voice calm but cutting. "You don't belong here," she said, her gaze piercing. Vanessa smirked, unfazed, but Claire's resolve held firm. She turned to Jack, who stood silent, his eyes searching hers. "You don't know me," she said, walking away, leaving him unsettled. Richard supported her from afar, his pride evident in every call. "You're my daughter," he reminded her. "No one can take that away." Claire nodded, her purpose clear. She would reclaim her life, her dignity, her truth. The past was calling, its echoes growing louder. Claire's sight had returned, but her heart remained shadowed by questions. Was Jack the boy from her lost memories? Could she forgive the man who had turned from her? Vanessa's deception was a thread unraveling, and Derek's greed a storm gathering force. Claire stood at the edge of a new chapter, her blindness gone, her spirit alight. She did not know it yet, but the truth was near, ready to break through the lies and lead her to a reckoning that would change everything. Claire Donovan, now Emily Langley, stood at the pinnacle of her newfound strength in New York. At 22, she had shed the blindness that once defined her, her hazel eyes now sharp with purpose. As CEO of Langley Corp's New York branch, she carried the weight of her father Richard Langley's trust, her every move a testament to her resilience. The Sullivan Mansion, once her prison, was a distant memory, replaced by a sleek penthouse overlooking Manhattan's skyline, yet the past clung to her, its threads woven into the necklace she wore, the sun and moon pendants a silent promise she was only beginning to understand. She had faced Margaret Hayes and the Sullivan family, reclaiming her dignity, but a greater storm loomed, one that would test her heart and rewrite her story. Across the city, Jack Sullivan wrestled with a crumbling empire and a fractured heart. Sullivan Enterprises teetered on the edge of ruin, its stock plummeting under Derek Marshall's ruthless campaign. Derek, a slick real estate tycoon with cold ambition, had allied with Vanessa Harper, feeding her secrets to destabilize Jack's company. Jack's faith in Vanessa as Sunny wavered, her inconsistencies gnawing at him. He questioned Greg Foster, his assistant, whose evasive answers only deepened his unease. Dorothy Sullivan, frail but fierce, clung to her belief in Vanessa, urging Jack to stand by her. "She's your future," Dorothy insisted, her voice trembling with age. But Jack's gaze kept drifting to Claire, the woman he had wronged, her presence at Langley events stirring something he could not name. The turning point came at a grand signing ceremony between Langley Corp and Marshall Corp, held in a glittering ballroom atop a Manhattan skyscraper. Claire orchestrated the event, her sapphire gown shimmering as she greeted power players with quiet confidence. Jack attended, invited as a courtesy, his suit crisp but his eyes shadowed by doubt. Vanessa clung to his arm, her smile tight, sensing the cracks in her facade. Derek Marshall smirked from the sidelines, his plan to secure a billion-dollar deal with Langley Corp nearly complete. But beneath the polished surface, tensions simmered. Sitting together, simmered, ready to erupt. As Claire took the stage to announce the partnership, a figure stumbled into the room, bloodied and pale. It was Greg Foster, Jack's assistant, his face bruised from a car accident days earlier. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he staggered toward Jack, his voice hoarse but urgent. "She lied," Greg rasped, pointing at Vanessa. "She's not Sunny. I helped her steal the necklace from Claire." Jack's face drained of color, his hands clenching as Greg continued. "Vanessa paid me to feed her your memories. She burned the scar herself. It's all a lie." Vanessa's eyes widened, her composure cracking as she lunged forward. "He's delusional," she cried, but Jack grabbed her arm, his voice low and lethal. "Is it true?" Before she could answer, Greg dropped another bombshell. "She killed Dorothy," he said, his words slicing through the room. "I saw her swap the medicine. She wanted control." Dorothy, who had passed days earlier, was mourned as a natural death, but Greg's accusation ignited fury. Jack released Vanessa, stepping back as if burned. Claire, watching from the podium, felt her heart race, the pieces of her past clicking into place. Vanessa, cornered, sneered, her mask slipping. "Fine," she spat, her voice venomous. "I did it. I took the necklace from that blind fool. I made you love me, Jack. And Dorothy, she was in my way." The crowd erupted, security moving toward her, but Vanessa bolted, shoving past guests to escape. Jack turned to Claire, his eyes pleading. "I didn't know," he said, his voice breaking. "I think—" "You're Sunny." Claire's breath caught, her hand touching the necklace. Memories flickered, faint but real. A boy by a lake, a promise under the moon. "Jackie," she whispered, the nickname from her father's photos surfacing. Before she could process it, an aide rushed in, breathless. "Vanessa's gone. She left a note, luring you to a warehouse in Queens." Claire's resolve hardened. "I'm going," she said, Jack nodding grimly. "Me too." They arrived at the abandoned warehouse under a stormy sky, its rusted walls creaking in the wind. Vanessa waited inside, her auburn hair wild, a knife gleaming in her hand. Derek Marshall stood beside her, his suit rumpled, his plan unraveling. You ruined everything, Vanessa snarled, lunging at Claire. Jack shoved Claire aside, taking a shallow cut to his arm as he wrestled Vanessa back. Derek grabbed Claire, his grip bruising, but she twisted free, her strength born of years of survival. You don't own me, she hissed, shoving him into a stack of crates. Vanessa broke free, raising the knife again, her eyes manic. If I can't have him, no one will, she screamed. Before she could strike, the warehouse doors burst open. Richard Langley stormed in, flanked by a private security team, their guns drawn. Drop it, Richard barked, his voice thunderous. Vanessa froze, the knife clattering to the floor as guards seized her and Derek. Richard pulled Claire into his arms, his relief palpable. You're safe, Emily, he said, using her true name. Jack, clutching his bleeding arm, sank to his knees before Claire. I was wrong, he choked out. You're Sonny. I promised you forever by that lake. I failed you. Tears streamed down his face as he pulled a crumpled letter from his pocket. Dorothy's last words. She knew, he said. She wrote, Claire is your salvation. Don't let her go. Claire's heart twisted, anger and love warring within her. She knelt beside him, her voice soft but firm. You hurt me, Jack. I lost everything because you wouldn't see me. He nodded, shame etching his features. I'll spend my life making it right, he vowed, his hand reaching for hers. She hesitated, then tore the divorce papers she'd carried, letting the pieces fall. We start over, she said, her eyes locking with his. The guards dragged Vanessa and Derek away, their schemes shattered, justice closing in. Richard watched, his pride evident. You're stronger than I ever dreamed, he told Claire, guiding her outside. Jack followed, his arm bandaged by a medic, his resolve unbroken. The storm cleared, stars piercing the night sky, a mirror to the promise they'd made as children. Claire touched her necklace, the sun and moon pendants warm against her skin. She had reclaimed her past, her sight, her power, but her heart remained a battlefield, torn between the pain Jack caused and the love she could not deny. The truth had set her free, yet the path ahead was hers to choose. Vanessa's screams faded as she was loaded into a police van. Derek silent beside her, their fates sealed. Claire stood with Jack under the moonlight, the warehouse a fading shadow behind them. Dorothy's death, Vanessa's betrayal, the Empire's near collapse, all converged in this moment. Claire saw Jack anew, the boy who swore to protect her, the man who lost his way. She took his hand, her grip tentative but real, a step toward healing neither could have foreseen. The storm had passed over the warehouse in Queens, leaving a quiet night bathed in starlight. Claire Donovan, now fully embracing her identity as Emily Langley, stood beside Jack Sullivan, her hand trembling in his. At 22, she had faced betrayal, loss, and a darkness deeper than her blindness ever was. Yet here she was, her hazel eyes reflecting the moon, her heart teetering between the pain of the past and the promise of something new. Jack, 30 and weathered by his own mistakes, held her gaze, his blue eyes raw with regret and hope. The chaos of Vanessa Harper and Derek Marshall's downfall faded into the background, their arrests a distant hum as police lights flashed against the rusted walls. Claire's father, Richard Langley, lingered nearby, his silver hair catching the moonlight, his presence a steady anchor. He had saved her from Vanessa's knife, his security team swift and decisive. "You're my daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he stepped back to give them space. "Whatever you choose, I'm here." Claire nodded, gratitude swelling in her chest. She turned to Jack, the man who had been her husband, her betrayer, and now, perhaps, her truth. The warehouse confrontation had peeled away the lies, revealing him as Jackie, the boy who promised her forever by a lake long ago. Dorothy Sullivan's letter, clutched in his bandaged hand, had sealed it. "Claire is your salvation," it read, a final plea from a grandmother who saw what Jack could not. Jack sank to one knee, his breath uneven. "I was blind, too," he said, his voice low and earnest. "Not like you, but worse. I didn't see you, Claire. I let Vanessa twist me, Let my grief for Sonny destroy us. I took your child, your trust, your light. Tears streaked his face, his words a confession laid bare. You're Sonny, you always were. I promised you under those stars and I broke it. But I'll spend every day fixing it, if you'll let me. Claire's throat tightened, memories flickering. Laughter by the water, a boy's hand in hers, a vow she'd forgotten until now. She saw the pain in his eyes, mirroring her own, and felt the weight of Dorothy's words. She knelt before him, her fingers brushing his. You broke me, Jack, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. I lost our baby because you turned away. I lost myself in that house, begging you to see me. I can't erase that. He nodded, accepting her truth, his head bowed. But I remember you now, she continued, softer. Jackie, who held my hand when I fell, who gave me this. She touched the necklace, its sun and moon pendants gleaming. I don't know if I can forget, but I can try to forgive. Jack looked up, hope flickering in his gaze. That's all I ask, he whispered, his hand tightening around hers. Claire stood, pulling him up with her. I'll stay, she said, her decision firm. Sullivan Enterprises is your grandmother's legacy. I'll help you save it, not as your wife, not yet, but as someone who believes in second chances. Jack's face lit with relief, a smile breaking through his sorrow. Thank you, he said, his voice cracking. I won't let you down again. Richard approached, clapping Jack on the shoulder. You've got work to do, son, he said, a rare warmth in his tone. Prove yourself to my girl. Days later, Claire and Jack stood in the Langley mansion in Los Angeles, a sprawling estate of white stone and glass. Richard had gathered the family for a quiet celebration, a welcome for his long-lost daughter. The air was soft with jasmine, the room glowing with candlelight. Claire wore a simple white dress, her necklace resting against her chest. Jack, in a dark suit, watched her with a reverence he'd never shown before. As the evening drew to a close, he took her hand, leading her to the garden under a sky ablaze with stars. Richard followed at a distance, his pride evident in his silent nod. Jack stopped beneath a willow tree, its branches swaying gently. I made a promise once, he said, pulling the sun pendant from his pocket, the twin to her moon. I swore I'd marry you, Sonny, under the stars. I lost you, but I found you again. He slipped the necklace around her neck, joining the pendants together. Sun and moon united at last. Will you let me keep that promise? Claire's breath caught, her heart swelling with a love she'd buried deep. She saw the boy he'd been, the man he was becoming, and nodded. Yes, she said, her voice a whisper. I will. He pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that erased the years apart, a vow renewed in silence. Richard watched from the porch, a tear slipping down his cheek, his daughter finally whole. Claire and Jack returned to Los Angeles hand in hand, their future uncertain but bright. Sullivan Enterprises would rise again, bolstered by Langley Corp's support, a testament to their shared resolve. They planned a quiet life there, away from New York's chaos, a chance to heal and build anew. The stars above mirrored the night of their childhood promise, a circle complete. Claire, once a blind girl sold for pennies, was now Emily Langley, a woman of strength and grace. Jack, once lost to his own blindness, was her partner, redeemed by love. Together they stepped into tomorrow, the necklace a symbol of a bond unbroken by time, a love forged through fire and found again in the light.